Are there any questions for the panel? I see some hands coming up.
That was very interesting. I appreciated all of your comments. Some water users keep the water in the water cycle while others remove the water from the water cycle. Are water license transfers keeping this in mind, i.e. irrigation water versus fracking water?
And did you want to direct that to anyone in particular, Judy?
Nope.
Okay. Well, a transfer to fracking purposes faces a number of problems. The major one is that there is a policy against the use of potable water for fracking purposes. So I don't think that transfer should occur, but I can tell you how it does occur. You can't acquire, it's very difficult to acquire a portion of someone's license in Alberta, but not BC, for fracking. But what tends to happen is that the industry goes to rural municipalities who don't transfer part of their license to the industry, but they simply sell their water to the industry themselves. Now, without wishing to put the cat amongst the pigeons, I don't believe they have the legal right to do that, because the license for the municipality says you have the license to use water for municipal purposes. I fail to see how an oil company using water for fracking is using water for municipal purposes. But that's what's happening at the moment, and unfortunately, that practice is inhibiting the development of recycled water, more recycled water being used for fracking, because it's too easy to acquire from rural municipalities. Are only too happy to sell the water and get the revenue.
Humphrey?
I think that the question is very good. Fracking and fracking water, I mean, it is very important to understand that this is potable water. I mean, even through the irrigation districts, a lot of the water, their allocation they're removing from the system does flow back in because it's not all taken by the users out of there. And when we do put potable water down there, and I think that there's a huge demand from people, and I think that that comes down to the slide ahead where we have to manage the water sources we have around us. And if there is water around that can be better used for fracking than fresh potable water. And we have to get to that point in time when we look at doing those things and using the best product there without touching our potable water. And I think that's critical.
It's protected at the moment by a policy, not by a regulation.
And I guess I would just add that I think possibly having more policy movement on that front might be of value. For instance, I talked about fees for water. For those downhole uses where the water is taken out of the cycle, perhaps there should be a fee involved whereby there might be other drivers, economic drivers, to move away from potable supplies, whether municipal or otherwise. So.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to add anything, Glenn?
No, I think the simple answer is no.
Thank you. I think I saw another hand in there. Was there another question there? Okay, thanks, Rick.
Is this one working this time?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the great discussion. A question about, I guess, the market. We talked a lot about transferring of licenses and transferring of allocations. You touched a little bit about potential for charging fees for water use, but we haven't talked about the potential to commoditize water versus commoditizing the licenses and the allocation. I'm wondering if you can touch a little bit on the risks associated with that with respect to, I guess, particularly the free trade agreement and what that means for water going outside of the country versus staying here. As I understand, that's one of the barriers to commoditizing water.
I don't think there's any danger of the Alberta transfer system, which does to an extent commodify water, leading to free trade in water for several reasons. First of all, there are two undoubtedly valid prohibitions against that in the Water Act, one of which simply prevents the movement of water from one river basin to another. And because we only have one river basin that flows south, the Milk River Basin, it's actually impossible to get water in that basin and across the border. And so I'm confident of that. But I think we've got to remember that water is commodified anyway. And I agreed with almost everything Jason said, but the problem of attaching a value to water license is already there. If I don't sell a part of my water allocation, which is all I can sell, I can't sell my license, I can sell part of my water allocation, I may get money for it because I have to invest in conservation and be deprived of other uses. And most importantly, if I want to capitalize on my water right, I simply sell an irrigated acre, which is more than 2.5 times the price of a dryland acre. So I've been profiting from that for 120 years. In fact, the system for water allocation is just like the system for homesteading. You paid very little for the land. You got the right to the land by improving it, inserting a waterworks, and then when you sold it, nobody said, hang on, we gave you this land for virtually nothing. Now it's time to take a slice of the profit.
Thanks. Does anybody want to add to that?
Sure.
You've been cut off.
Yeah. I think that's certainly a concern that I've heard many times. I think international trade agreements, there can be a lot of uncertainty, both in terms of investment provisions under NAFTA or otherwise. That's a different issue from the bulk export of water. And I think as long as that road isn't traveled down, like as long as we don't start exporting water, I think the issue becomes if you start exporting water, then it becomes more of a concern.
Okay, we'll have one more comment, and then we'll take one last question. Okay, Glenn?
I think the point has to be made. We made it in the introduction, though. Like when you do extrapolate to this commodification of water, this is a major public policy decision that has to be put to Albertans, to the voters, and it has to be put in a proper context of what exactly is occurring currently and in the future. I don't think it would be something to be determined by interpretations of the Water Act. I really do think this is the discussion we need to be having amongst all Albertans.
I have the bruises and wounds to show how extensive that discussion was in the 1990s prior to the passage of the Water Act.
Okay, thank you. We're getting the nudge from our MC, so we'll take one last question.
Yeah. It seems that in this province, we're basically the headwaters for quite a few of the major tributaries. Now, one of the things that hasn't been addressed, how much input is given from, say, the province of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, that shares our watershed storage?
Well, if I may, we have a master agreement on apportionment of the water with Saskatchewan and Manitoba, where Alberta agrees to allow 50% of the natural flow of the river to pass to the neighboring province. We have water quality not very adequately dealt with by water quality objectives for, I think it's 16 reaches of water across the two provinces, which deal with the quality of waters being passed from one province to the downstream province. But so I think the prairie rivers are fairly well taken care of. The controversial side is that we have no such agreement with the northward flowing rivers, which engage British Columbia, Yukon, Northwest Territories, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. And I have to be a bit dismayed about this because in 1971, entering such agreement was described as a matter of urgent national concern, and 43 years later, we're not very close to it yet. So I regard the major problem in that one. The prairie river is not free of problems. The eutrophication of Lake Winnipeg, which is a very serious problem, is undoubtedly caused by runoff into prairie rivers. So I don't think our water quality objectives are doing the job, but we've at least got the structure there. We don't have the structure at all in the Peace Athabasca system.
Humphrey?
In my travels as CFA Vice President, talking to producers and people from Saskatchewan, they do have concerns that we're not meeting that 50% standard of flow. And through my discussion, I hope we spur that, to have that quantitative and those qualitative discussions as we move forward to address that. I believe that there will be a push from our downstream cousins to the east to require us to meet these standards that have been there. And I think that that's part of the discussion that we have to foster here to get a better measure of our expected flows, of the flows we have today. And there's going to be a push from them, I do believe.
There's very good data on that. And Alberta's never failed in a year to make its 50%, even in the most serious drought.
Go ahead, Jason. I think you might get the last word.
I was just going to say, and if you're in the Red Deer River Basin, lucky you, because you're making up the lion's share of what's being passed on.
That's the point of measurement, though. It's in Saskatchewan. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. Clearly more questions to have and more dialogue to have, and I think we all may look a little differently at our bottle of water and our glass of water this evening. So thanks very much to our panelists tonight.